Pencil power. Why hello there, art venturers. In this video we're going to be talking about digital painting. But before we get started, I wanted to mention that I have an art mentorship program. So if you want to work with me directly, doing a customized program to meet you where you are and move you towards whatever your dream art style or subject you want to focus on is, then check out the description. I'll leave a link to a form you can fill out to get the process started. All right, cool. So what we want to do in this video is talk about a good way that you can get started on digital painting. And there are just so many different methods, and I think that depending on the style you want to go for, you're going to choose a different method, and some people are a little more meticulous and want something that's very orderly, and so this isn't necessarily that kind of digital painting. What we're going to do is more of like what I think is a really fun and easy way just to get started, just to jump in and to play around without having to use very much of any technical knowledge aside from just the basic brushes and colors. So digital painting, really one of the biggest things is the sketch. A lot depends on the sketch. If you have a good sketch, it doesn't have to be super tight, though a lot of people do like to make really tight sketches before getting started. But it should be, reasonably well thought out so you can see the main shapes. And this is a sketch we did in the How to Draw Torn video, so you can check that out. I think I'm going to make the canvas a little bigger because I'm going to want to focus on the head at some point. So let's do that here. Before we begin, I'll talk briefly about paintbrushes. And the main one that I'm using, I'll put links to all of these in the description, but actually I should preface by saying you don't need a fancy paintbrush to get started, and I think it's fun to actually just experiment with different stuff and see what works for you. The general process and technique I'm showing you will work for any kind of brush, so it's interesting to play around with. So the main one that I use, the one that I use for this whole demo and video, is Dave Greco's DG Main, this guy right here. So it's nice because it's like you can, it works at like different sizes. There's a little bit of texture there, and you can get, if you press lighter, you can get the opacity is lighter. So that's one of the main features I think is important, is that some brushes can be like just always the same. You can't really press lighter. If I go lighter, it just makes it thinner. So you probably don't want to use a brush like that. You want to use one that has more this quality. Oops, this quality. So yeah, DG Main is like a really simple, good one that you can just use. There's also Loish, I think. Her brush set, this one is actually free. And just using the hard round one, you can do, paint with this, and it'll look almost the same as the DG Main one. Just missing a little bit of that texture, but you might like that for your pieces. It depends on your style. It'll be a little bit smoother. So those are two good ones you can use here. And the last thing is I use Jing smudging. When I use the smudging, I use the new textured one to move stuff around. You can actually just, am I doing that? Oh no, it's not on smudge. That's not how it works. So if I go here and then do the smudge, see, then you can kind of like pull this stuff around to blend it. And then there's also the edge softener, which you can just do to like blend things more just smoothly, to smooth things out like that. So yeah, that's, I think, a good place to start. But yeah, don't let the brush thing hold you back, and just have fun with it. Okay. So you have your sketch, and the one here, let me delete all these layers so that it'll be simple. So right now we have the layer with the sketch, and then a secondary layer underneath. The sketch layer I'm going to change to multiply as the blending option, and lower the opacity a little bit. What that's going to do is it's going to get darker when there's a darker color underneath, basically, so that you'll be able to see the sketch when you start coloring. Then you go to the layer underneath, which will be the coloring layer, and choose a base color to start with. So I'm going to make my Taurin, like a brownish color, let's say. And so what I want to choose is the middle color, like without any light or shadow on it. What's the most middle color for this part of the body? So I'll use this and just start coloring in, and you're going to come and get a little more like, you'll refine in later layers, so you can actually just be really rough here, and go ahead and actually, like if I was doing this whole figure, I probably shade in the whole figure with these base colors to start with. So I'll start that process, but then I will move in to focus on the details probably of the face. So I might do something like this, and then this side, I'll just do the waist up so you can get the idea. You can keep this moving along. And then let's say I want the mane to be like a greenish color for some reason. Let's just go crazy. Then I would do that wherever there's the mane. Or you know what, I don't want the mane to be a greenish color. I'm going to change that and just make it a nice brown. And really, like you can see, you're just layering in the colors super like roughly. I want the shoulder things to be green because he's like a druid. And I'm not going too saturated. I'm not going too light or too dark here. So we'll do that. I think the green shoulders are a little saturated, but I don't want to get overly caught up in the details right now. So like when you're doing digital painting, one of the nice things is you can do things on different layers, and then I could have changed the colors of the shoulder pads using this hue and saturation. I could have just done this and only changed the color of the shoulder pads to see what I liked. I could change everyone and make a purple Taurin now if I want. But the point is, these are kind of probably better practices for digital painting. But like I said, what I'm trying to show here is an easy way to just jump right in. And I actually really enjoy working this way. So let's go ahead, let's make his horns a dark color. Okay, cool. And his beard, maybe we'll make it the same color as his hair. Okay, so let's say these are our basic colors, and let's start zooming in and working with a little more detail. So I'd probably refine the sketch more, ideally if I know that I'm going to do a digital painting, but just to show that you can work with a looser sketch, I will work with what we have here. Cool. So the next thing is to start adding like the light and shadow areas. So starting with the shadow areas is usually better. And one of the things you'll want to do is decide what color the light is. Is it warm or cool? So if it's like moonlight, it might be, this kind of blue color. If it's sunlight, it's going to be a yellow color. And then we were going to want to move away. So you select the color, the base color, and then you go in here and move away from the base color. So let's say it's yellow for a sunny day, so I'm going to move to the left ever so slightly, just a tiny bit. And then I'm going to make this a little bit darker and a little bit more saturated. So moving it down into the right for the shadows. And that's just like a basic rule of thumb. Yeah, you can close. So then I'm going to come in here and start shading in generally where the shadow would be. So underneath the head, behind this ear, put shadow there, and where else? Under the nose, maybe a little bit, not too much, under the chin. And then as you do this, you'll start to see your form come out, and you can lower the sketch. So if I take the sketch completely out, I can see what's starting to develop here. So let's come back, lower the sketch opacity a little bit, do the nostrils, Let's get the white of the eye. It's a little bit too bright because I want to make sure to leave room to lighten it up afterwards. So doing the white of the eyes there, a little more like detail around the nose. Let's do the teeth with a little bit of yellow in that, like that. I can add another tooth in there if I want, so you can start to even to get creative and let your painting evolve. And since I'm only focusing on the head, I think I'm going to leave it at that. And I'll put a little more, I'm refining the horns now, shape of the horns. And then let's put some of the hair in there too. So see, now I'm just sampling the color that's already down there. I'm careful to avoid not clicking where the lines are because that's darker than the original color, and I want to keep just that one plain color. And then this thing in the background, which supposed to be some kind of, it was just indicating some kind of organic looking pauldrons. So I don't really have an idea for that, but I could still, you can see how you can use the sculpting to evolve the idea. Though, like I said, I do think it is better to start with a well thought out sketch. You'll save yourself time in the long run. But if you just want to jump into digital painting, sometimes I do, so I totally get that, then you can do it like this as well. It'll just be a little more of a push-pull process, but that can be really fun because you'll discover different things along the way. Okay, cool. So let's lower this sketch layer so you can start to see the form coming out. So I'm going to make it really low like that. And I'm going to start finding like the darkest, so I'll go even darker, more saturated, and a little bit cooler, so away from the yellow side. And then like this will be kind of like the darkest point, so like this, right where the line of the lip, maybe like right underneath the chin, like inside the nostrils, like that. And then here, let's make the whole nose. So the nose, now I'm going to start to play with the colors more. So the nose should be a little bit warmer, I think, like a little more red. Something like that, maybe. That could be a little bit too much, but it's okay. Let's leave it like that. And then I can start sculpting in details. And this is something, as you play around and experiment. One of the best things I think to start digital painting with, and also I'll do a separate tutorial on that, is rocks. Because you could just put any kind of shape down, and there's no like right or wrong answer with a rock. And there's no color either, so let's actually make this gray. So you can start with just like a middle gray on a rock. Oops, okay, we'll keep it the lighter gray. And then go to like a darker gray. And when you start to like build out some forms based on the direction the light's coming. Right? And then you can kind of then you get like the highlights. And you can just start like painting a random rock, and you can see how like there's no like right or wrong answer. And then I could say, oh, let me add like a crack in the rock, like right there. And then, okay, let's go a little darker to get the darkest spot of that crack. So you see how, you'd be practicing painting forms, but since there's no like strict right or wrong answer, because rocks can look like anything pretty much, it takes a lot of pressure off. So I think that's a really cool place to start. Like that's a really weird looking rock, but I could keep refining it and be like, okay, you know what? I don't actually like it like that. Let's paint over it, and let's make this higher. Oops. Let's make that go higher like that. And then let's have the rock more like this. And you see already, okay, here now we have an edge there. So we can have that plane change. Kind of smooth it out. So you can see, oh, okay, cool. I've immediately, easily kind of changed the whole look of the rock just by, painting over that way. So that's a great way to just kind of practice and start getting comfortable with digital painting in general. Okay, cool. So it's not the greatest looking rock, but for the purposes of this demonstration, it shall do. So let's get back to our Tauren. So the Tauren's exactly the same, like he's just some, some form. You can think of this nose as a big rock, and you can start to like decide where there are more hard edges and where there's like a soft edge. So obviously you still need to study, the basics of painting, light and shadow, basic color theory, which is some of the stuff I'm sharing with you, is how it gets more saturated and like opposite, like cooler usually, but opposite to the light source, the opposite color of the light source. So color theory stuff like that you'll have to learn along the way. But you can start to play around and see at this point, have I taken out the sketch completely? No, it's still there a little bit, but I don't really need it. I could take it out at this point and just start painting. So I would usually maybe go on a little bit further before I do that, but just so you can see how the process looks once you are ready to take out the sketch, I'll start working from that now. So now I'm starting to see, like I know where the forms are. I have my basic colors, so I'm sampling the colors, and there's a little, button, so I can do that pretty quickly. So when I wanted this darker color that I've sampled over here, so I can refine that shadow. Now I want this color over here, so I want to build out this area a little bit more, and then I even sample that middle color so that I can kind of blend it. I can sample this other color so that I can, basically like erase, the equivalent of erasing. And so now it's just a matter of more and like going deeper and deeper into this process. So you can see how it's starting to shape up and come together, and how there just be more and more detail. So now I don't like how red this is, so I think I'm going to make it, I'm just going to kind of paint over it like this. And then I'll sample this color again. I was pressing lightly so it still has some of the color underneath. And then I sample it and I go for the full opacity. Like that. Cool. Yeah, I think that's a little more subtle. Or do I want it to just be the regular? Anyways, this isn't the place where I'll kind of go through too much of that, because I want to keep this quick and get into a little more detail. And so one thing I also like to do is sample from other places. So I need a really dark color here, so I'm going to use the dark color from the horn, so that there's a little bit of color cohesion between the horn and the nose. So like that. And then maybe I'll come in and use the blur tool, the smudge tool, to smooth out some areas. Like that. And then I'll come in here, I sample this nose color, and carve away at the nose a little more. And then maybe I want to make a little ridge, so I'll go darker, do my whole, the color wheel thing I showed you about making it darker, more saturated, and moving the hue away from the light source. And then I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to make it lighter and more saturated a little bit and move it towards the light source. So now we're getting into some highlights. So I moved it more towards the yellow, and I can add some highlights here. Look at that, maybe go around the ridge of the nose. And so this is where, doing studies and some experience and playing around comes into handy to know like where the light source is coming from, and how to accentuate the way things look and all that stuff. So what I might do is, I'll show a little more examples. So let's go to the main skin tone and do the same thing. Go lighter, more saturated, and a little more yellow. Start to build out where the light's hitting the most. Adding a little bit of that to give it even more three-dimensionality. So you can see, like, the lips, maybe I would want them to be a little bit more red because lips tend to have more blood on the surface, so it'll be a little more red there. And then here in the shadows, definitely want to go darker, and just sometimes you don't want it more saturated. Like, that's a rule of thumb, but I've noticed that that's not always the way I want to do it. So I want to build out this form a little more. May have gone too dark, so let's do that. Okay. So yeah, so now it's actually like, I don't know, I really enjoy this part, like sculpting, kind of playing around with the colors. And so I've gotten right into the digital painting side of things without having to do too much sketching and things like that. So it's a really fun way, I think, to start, to be able to like jump right in, as I've mentioned. And then here, let's do it again, lighter, more saturated, more yellow. And kind of round the form out. And then the opposite, darker, more saturated, more towards the red or cooler for the shadow side. All right, so you can see how this is shaping up. And then the next thing, and what I'll do, I'll show you I'll complete like one little area with detail. Maybe the eyes is a good spot, just to show you what the next step would be. And then I might actually work on this a little bit more. I won't finish it because that'll take many hours, and I want to upload this video more soon. But I'll work on it, and you'll see it, and it'll probably be the thumbnail, of course. So you'll have already caught a glimpse, but then I can show you, the finished painting in a moment. So let's go to the eyes and do that. So if I was going to do, so I wouldn't like start working on one spot, this much. I wouldn't even work on the face this much. I would have actually like, let's bring back the sketch. Would have actually kind of done the whole body, like moving around, like getting the general lighting and stuff like that before having jumped into the specifically like one detailed place. But I wanted to show you, so usually this process is going to be, do everything basically, then do everything to this level, and then finally come in and add the details to, which is what I'll do now for the eyeballs, the eyes. So if I'm coming in, you can zoom in really far. It's one of the nice things about digital painting. I'll sample this dark color and start to like put in the more subtle details. And I still want to be, I think, as zoomed out as possible so I can see the bigger picture and not get, while I'm doing the detailed work. So here, just sculpting out. So the way that there were like all the bumps and forms of the face, like there's almost always every smaller, every part of the body has a smaller area that also has the same nuance in the forms and the shapes. So that's what, great artists who really understand the anatomy and everything can showcase those tiny details, and it really, is something that I think is appreciated by those who enjoy art. So I can put in the eyes like that. Let's say, I don't love the look in his eyes. See, I haven't worked on the expression, the body language and all that stuff is not the most exciting here. So, but that's what you can still kind of work on at this point. Okay, I mean, I don't want to overthink that. I might work on that off camera, but let's finish off this drawing. So let's make his eyes an interesting color. Maybe we'll sample this green up here. So we'll bring in the green of the shoulders to bring some color harmony to the whole piece. Oops. Do I want his pupils to be a little bit bigger so I can sculpt that out like that? Oh, keep moving. Wow, it's really zooming out there quick. And then maybe with the eyes you can bring in a little bit, you know, like all these nuances and colors. And then really start to get to the larger range of values. So I went very dark, not quite black, but a very dark color, which it will read as black here. And then I'm going to go and do the opposite and get this really light color that will read as white. Add a little highlights there. And then since the eyeball is a rounded form, I would come in and go again darker, a little more saturated, a little more red, and fill in the shadow. Give it a bit of a shadow. And come in here, and you can see how you can really get into all the details and spend the rest of your life working on, you know, a digital painting. It's really hard to know like when the rendering's done. Often I think it just depends on practicality. You just kind of run out of time or decide that you're over it. So there. So you can see now how the whole, let's make this darker, etc. You can see how now the whole process would look. So now I would take this eye and be able to continue. I mean, I don't actually, so the thing is I've had paintings where I've invested a lot of time in them, but like this is not the most exciting pose and stuff. And if I wish to continue painting this, probably halfway through I'd be like, I should have had him standing like this or casting a spell or doing something cool. So I'm not actually going to work on this too much more. Maybe I'll just finish up the eye as an exercise. Like, so we can play around, give him some blue in there. That could be cool. Nice. But yeah, that's basically the digital painting sort of 101. And thanks, Mitch, for requesting. This is very much at the request of my friend Mitch, who was asking me about digital painting tutorials. So I thought, yeah, let me share what I think would be a helpful way to go. But again, depending on your style, depending on how you like to work, there are so many different ways to do digital painting. So I think it's really beneficial to experiment and to have fun and to try different things. And don't worry about making a bad painting. I have lots and lots of quote unquote bad paintings that I didn't like the way they turned out. But you know, that's part of the learning process. And like I said in the beginning, if you want some support or help with learning digital painting or drawing, especially if you're a beginner or early intermediate artist, I can help you out. Just check out the link in the description for more info about the art mentoring program. It's one-on-one art mentoring. Okay, cool. So here is the painting where I'm going to leave it for now. You see if I zoom out, I haven't worked on the rest, but this gives an idea of what it would look like if you continue to render it. And I'll turn on the sketch so you can see, how it fits in. And you could literally use the same techniques and go throughout the whole thing. Now I did do a couple other little things that aren't too complicated, but I wanted to keep this as a general, just like dive right in, easy way to get started in digital painting. So if you want to see more videos on digital painting stuff, let me know in the comments and I can do a series to look more into this and talk more deeply about these things. Because basically I did three things. I'll just give you the quick overview right now. Let me put these in a group. So first off, the painting looked more like this. And then, oops, no, more like this. You can see the colors are toned down. And I think I went into the color balance is the one that you can play around with. Or also hue, saturation, and brightness in the same menu. And start to play with things and get it looking, how you'd like. So, but yeah, that could be a whole video on its own, so I won't go into that. The other one is hue, saturation, brightness. But just to usually use the saturation, maybe you could make it a little brighter or darker if you want. And there are some cool techniques you can use to do that. So I just made it a little bit, you know, I think I brought up the saturation and levels, made a little more contrast. And then, so what I like to do sometimes when I'm not sure if I want to make a change, but I'm not sure if it'll look good, is I just duplicate the layer and start on the new one. And I know I always have this version I can go back to. And then here I have an overlay layer with a yellow color to create this lighting, and then just another regular layer where I added this rim light. And so doing stuff on separate layers is cool because you could end up coming in and doing something like, let's say I take like a soft brush and I alpha locked it, means it'll only paint on the places that have paint. And I could come in here and let's get like a red color, see what that looks like. And see, I can change the color of the yellow here. So that could look kind of cool. Give a little more variety. See, now it's got that blood red on the tip of the horn that fades into the orange and yellow. So you can do stuff like that. I'm going to leave it yellow. I think I like that for now. So, so yeah, this is where the painting has ended up. And if you do make some paintings, I'd love to check them out so you can share them with me on Instagram. So that's it. I hope that this tutorial was helpful and fun and imbued you with just a little bit more pencil power. Okay, cool.